Have you ever wondered what the face of absolute arrogance looks like? Imagine for a moment a time before the pharaohs of Egypt built their pyramids, before the Caesars of Rome commanded their legions, and before the modern tyrants of history wrote their names in blood. Imagine a world where one man did not just claim to be a king, but claimed to be the very owner of the heavens and the earth. What if I told you that the blueprint for every dictatorship, every act of oppression, and every war against the truth began with a single man? He was the first to wear a crown, the first to enslave free minds, and the first to look at the sky and declare war on the Almighty. But how does a human being, made of flesh and bone, reach a level of delusion where he believes he can kill God? And more importantly, would you recognize this deception if it stood before you today, disguised in power and prestige? Welcome to Divine Sagas, where we peel back the layers of history to reveal the spiritual battles that define our existence. Today, we journey to ancient Babylon to uncover the rise of Nimrod, history's first autocrat, and the terrifying yet miraculous way his empire crumbled. This is not just a story of the past, it is a mirror for our souls. To understand the magnitude of this tyranny, we must transport ourselves back thousands of years to the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia. The great flood of Noah was a distant memory, a story grandfathers told their grandsons. Humanity had once again multiplied, spreading across the earth. But with the passage of time, the fear of Allah began to fade from the hearts of men. The clear waters of monotheism were muddied by the dark ink of idolatry. In this era of forgetting, a figure rose from the lineage of Cush, the son of Ham. His name was Namrud, or as the West knows him, Nimrod. He was not born a monster, he was made one by the intoxication of power. History tells us he was physically imposing, intellectually brilliant and charismatic. He was a hunter, a builder, and a strategist. But his ambition knew no bounds. He looked at the scattered tribes of humanity and saw not brothers, but subjects. He looked at the vast plains of Shinar and saw a kingdom that would bow only to him. Nimrod was the first man in history to place a crown upon his own head. Before him, leadership was about guidance, about tribal elders and wisdom. But Nimrod introduced the concept of the state as a god. He centralized power in Babylon, a city of unimaginable splendor and unimaginable corruption. He built walls that scraped the clouds and palaces that shimmered with gold. But his greatest construction was not made of brick and mortar. It was the psychological prison he built around his people. He monopolized the food supply. If you wanted to eat, if you wanted your children to survive the harsh winters, you had to come to the granaries of Nimrod. But there was a price. It wasn't gold or silver. The price was your confession. You had to acknowledge him not just as a provider, but as your Lord. This was the first time humanity witnessed the weaponization of hunger. He starved the body to enslave the soul. Can you imagine the atmosphere of Babylon? The air thick with incense burning before idols, the streets patrolled by soldiers who answered only to the king, and the whispers of fear in every home. People forgot the name of Allah. They looked at Nimrod, who controlled the life-giving grain, and they thought, here is the one who sustains us. It is a terrifying reality of the human condition. When we are desperate, we are prone to worship the hand that feeds us, forgetting the one who created the hand. Nimrod knew this weakness. He exploited it. He declared, I am the one who gives life, and I am the one who brings death. And for a long time, the world believed him. There was no resistance. There was no voice of reason. The darkness was absolute. But Allah, in his infinite mercy, never leaves humanity wandering in the dark forever.
When the night is at its darkest, the dawn is inevitable. In the midst of this totalitarian nightmare, a disruption occurred. It didn't come in the form of an invading army or a natural disaster. It began with a dream. The tyrants of history are often haunted by their own subconscious, for the soul knows the truth even when the mind denies it. Nimrod saw a star rising in the sky, a light so brilliant that it eclipsed the sun and the moon. This light did not just shine, it obliterated the symbols of his power. He woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding against his ribs, a sensation he was not used to: fear. He summoned his soothsayers, the magicians and the astrologers. They trembled before him, for they knew that delivering bad news to Nimrod was a death sentence. But the dream was too clear to ignore. "O king," they whispered, "a child will be born in your kingdom, a boy who will tear the crown from your head and destroy the religion of your fathers." The reaction of Nimrod was the reaction of every tyrant throughout history, from Pharaoh to Herod: violence. He ordered the slaughter of the innocents. He thought that by spilling the blood of babies, he could drown the decree of Allah. He separated men from their wives. He sent spies into every home. He turned Babylon into a slaughterhouse. But who can plot against the best of planners? The very child he sought to kill was protected by the divine command. While Nimrod's soldiers scoured the city, a mother filled with fear and trust gave birth in a hidden cave. There, away from the eyes of the state, grew Ibrahim, or Abraham, the friend of Allah. He grew up not in the luxury of the palace, but in the purity of nature, his heart uncorrupted by the propaganda of Babylon. As Ibrahim grew, he looked at the world differently. While the people of Babylon were busy prostrating to statues carved of stone and wood, Ibrahim looked up. He looked at the stars, the moon, and the sun. He asked the questions that we often forget to ask in our busy modern lives. "Is this my Lord?" he asked, when the star shone, but it set. "I do not love things that fade," he declared. He saw the moon rise, beautiful and luminous, but it too vanished with the dawn. He saw the sun, the greatest of them all, blinding in its power, but even the sun surrendered to the night. In this process of elimination, Ibrahim discovered the profound truth of Tawheed, or monotheism. He realized that worship belongs only to the Creator, who is constant, eternal, and unseen, not to the created things that rise and fall. He returned to his people not just as a young man, but as a messenger carrying the weight of the truth. The confrontation was inevitable. You cannot have two swords in one sheath, and you cannot have two truths in one land. On one side stood Nimrod, backed by an army, untold wealth, and a civilization built on fear. On the other side stood Ibrahim, a young man with no army, no wealth, and no political power. All he had was the truth. It seems like an impossible mismatch, doesn't it? If you were a gambler in Babylon, you would bet everything on Nimrod. But here at Divine Sagas, we know that the math of Allah is different from the math of the world. One man with the truth is a majority. Ibrahim began his mission by challenging the very foundation of their society, the idols. We all know the famous story of how he entered the temple while the city was celebrating a festival. The silence of the temple was deafening. Rows of statues, gods of rain, gods of war, gods of fertility, stood there staring with lifeless eyes. Ibrahim placed food before them and mocked them. "Will you not eat? Why do you not speak?" With an axe in his hand, he shattered the illusion. He broke them into pieces, leaving only the largest one intact, hanging the axe around its neck. When the people returned and saw their gods reduced to rubble, their outrage was not just religious, it was political. An attack on the idols was an attack on the state, an attack on Nimrod's authority.
They dragged Ibrahim to the court of the king. This is the moment history held its breath for, the encounter between the tyrant and the prophet.
Picture the throne room of Nimrod. High pillars, guards with spears, courtiers dressed in silk, and Nimrod himself, sitting high above, looking down with contempt. And there stands Ibrahim, alone, yet radiating a calmness that unsettled the king. Nimrod asked, "Who is your Lord?" He expected Ibrahim to say a name of a lesser god, or perhaps to beg for mercy. But Ibrahim replied with a statement that shook the pillars of the palace. "My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death." Nimrod laughed. It was a laugh of arrogance. "I give life and I cause death," he retorted. He signaled to his guards. They brought 2 prisoners from the dungeon. One was sentenced to death, the other was innocent. Nimrod ordered the execution of the innocent man and freed the one sentenced to die. "You see," Nimrod gloated, "I have killed one and given life to the other." It was a childish trick, a twisted logic. He didn't give life, he merely refrained from murder. But he was playing to the crowd, using sophistry to confuse the masses. Ibrahim did not argue with the fool on his own level. He did not get entangled in semantics. He shifted the battlefield to a place where Nimrod had no reach. "Verily, Allah brings the sun from the east, so bring it from the west." The room went silent. The smile faded from Nimrod's face. The courtiers looked at their king, waiting for him to command the sun. But the sun continued its course, indifferent to the tyrant's ego. Nimrod was dumbfounded. For the first time in his life, he was publicly humiliated. His power was shown to be limited, fragile, and ultimately fake. The Quran describes this moment perfectly. "Thus was he confounded who disbelieved." But humiliation often breeds rage in the hearts of the arrogant. Nimrod could not defeat Ibrahim with logic, so he resorted to brute force. "Burn him," the cry went out. "Aid your gods if you are going to do anything." They decided to make an example of Ibrahim that no one would ever forget. They spent days, perhaps weeks, gathering wood. It was a national project. People believed that by contributing a branch to the fire, they were earning favor with the gods. They built a pyre so massive that birds could not fly over it without being scorched by the heat. The fire roared like a beast, a man-made hell on earth. They had to use a catapult to throw Ibrahim into the flames because the heat was too intense to get close. As he was launched into the air, the angels of the heavens wept. The angel of rain asked Allah for permission to extinguish the fire. The angel of the wind asked to blow it away. Gabriel, appeared to Ibrahim in mid-air and asked, "Do you have any need?" Imagine that moment, facing a terrible death, and the greatest angel offers you help. But Ibrahim's heart was attached to something higher than angels. He replied, "From you, no, but from Allah, yes. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil." Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. He landed in the fire, but the fire did not burn. The laws of physics, which are merely servants of Allah, were suspended. Allah commanded, "O fire, be coolness and safety upon Ibrahim." Note the precision of the command. If he had just said coolness, Ibrahim might have frozen to death. But he said coolness and safety. Inside that roaring inferno, Ibrahim sat in a garden of tranquility. The flames danced around him, but did not touch his skin. They only burned the ropes that bound him. He was the freest man in Babylon, sitting in the center of the fire. Nimrod watched from his high tower, expecting to see a charred body. Instead, he saw Ibrahim sitting calmly. The shock must have been paralyzing. The people watched in awe. The spell of Nimrod began to crack. If the king's greatest weapon, fire, could not harm this man, then surely the king was not God. Ibrahim walked out of the fire unscathed, his face glowing with the light of faith. This was the turning point. Nimrod's absolute authority was shattered. But rather than submitting, rather than accepting the truth, his heart hardened even further. He declared war on the heavens. This brings us to the unknown chapter of the answer, the Namrud Samharan, the destruction of the tyrant. Nimrod, in his insanity, decided he would build a tower to reach the sky and kill the God of Ibrahim. He built the Tower of Babel, a monument to human arrogance. He shot an arrow into the sky, and it came back stained with blood, likely a bird struck by chance, or a test from Allah to let him persist in his delusion. "I have killed the God of Ibrahim," he boasted. He gathered an army, a massive force of trained soldiers, chariots, and weapons. He marched them out into the open plain, challenging Allah to a battle. "Where is your Lord's army?" Nimrod screamed at the sky. "Let him send his forces against mine." He stood there, clad in golden armor, surrounded by thousands of elite warriors. They were ready for lions, for bears, for other men. They were ready for lightning or earthquakes. But Allah's army is not like the armies of men. Allah does not need to send dragons or giants to humble the oppressor. He uses the smallest, most insignificant of his creations to show the weakness of the oppressor. On the horizon, a dark cloud appeared. Nimrod smiled. "Finally," he thought, "a storm. I can fight this." But as the cloud got closer, the sound changed. It wasn't the rumble of thunder. It was a buzzing, a high-pitched, maddening buzzing. The cloud was not made of water vapor. It was made of life. It was a swarm of gnats, mosquitoes, millions of them. They were so numerous they blotted out the sun, turning the day into night. The soldiers of Nimrod, who feared no man, looked up in confusion. What were they supposed to do? You cannot swing a sword at a mosquito. You cannot shoot an arrow at a gnat. The swarm descended. It was a living nightmare. The insects covered the soldiers, biting their eyes, entering their ears, filling their mouths. The horses panicked, throwing their riders. The mighty army of Babylon, the conquerors of the known world, were defeated in minutes by fragile insects. They ran, they screamed, they clawed at their own faces. The irony was devastating. The man who challenged the creator of the universe was being dismantled by the weakest of creatures. But for Nimrod, the punishment was specific. He did not die on the battlefield. That would have been too easy, perhaps too honorable, for a man who claimed divinity. He escaped back to his palace, locking the doors, thinking he was safe. But one gnat, just one, a tiny limping gnat, according to some narrations, had followed him. It didn't attack him from the outside. It flew up his nose. It entered his nasal passage, crawling upwards into the delicate cavities of his skull. The king of the world, the man who had terrified nations, froze. He sneezed, he snorted, he clawed at his nose, but the gnat dug deeper. It eventually lodged itself near his brain, and then it began to buzz. Imagine having a sound inside your head that never stops, a scratching, gnawing sensation that vibrates against your very sanity. Nimrod screamed. The pain was not just physical, it was a maddening pressure that made him feel as though his head was about to explode. The man who wanted to silence the message of Allah could now hear nothing but the buzzing of a soldier of Allah.
The irony of his punishment was absolute. The man who claimed to be a god was brought to his knees by a creature so small it is often dismissed as a nuisance. The pain was so intense that Nimrod found only one way to get temporary relief. He discovered that if he was struck on the head, the jarring motion would cause the insect to stop its activity for a moment. So the king of Babylon, the mighty tyrant, issued a new command to his servants. But this command was not to build a palace or conquer a city. He ordered his guards to hit him. Picture this scene in the royal court. The courtiers who once prostrated before him in fear now stood around him, watching their god beg for a beating. He would scream, "Hit me, harder!"
and his servants would take their sandals, their heavy leather boots, and eventually iron mallets and strike the head of the king. The crown would fall, rolling across the floor, ignored. The head that was too proud to bow to the Creator was now being smashed by the shoes of his own slaves. Historians and scholars suggest that this torture did not last for a day or a week. Some narrations suggest he suffered for as long as he reigned in tyranny. 400 years of dominion, followed by 400 years of torture, though Allah knows the exact duration. He lived in a personal hell of his own making, kept alive only to suffer, until his brain was finally destroyed by the very beatings he requested. He died not by the sword of a hero, but by the accumulation of his own humiliation. This is the unknown chapter of the answer. The answer to arrogance is not always a thunderbolt. Sometimes it is a gnat. The answer to those who claim they are self-sufficient is to make them dependent on the blows of a hammer to find a moment's peace. Nimrod's life ended in madness and agony, leaving behind a legacy of dust. His tower crumbled, his lineage vanished, and his name became a synonym for foolish pride. Meanwhile, Abraham, the man he tried to burn, became the father of nations. Today, billions of people, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, honor Ibrahim. We name our children after him. We retrace his footsteps in Hajj. But who names their child Nimrod? Who honors the memory of the tyrant? The fire of Nimrod cooled down, but the fire of hell that awaits the arrogant never ceases. But let us pause here. It is easy to look at Nimrod and feel a sense of detachment. It is easy to say, he was a monster and I am a believer. But the story of Nimrod is not preserved in history just to entertain us with the downfall of a villain. It is a mirror. We must ask ourselves the terrifying question, is there a trace of Nimrod inside of me? No, we do not claim to be gods. We do not build towers to shoot arrows at the sky. But how often do we look at our achievements, our wealth, our degrees, our status, and think, I did this? How often do we feel that we are the masters of our own destiny, forgetting the one who gave us the breath to plan that destiny? When we look down on others because we have more money, that is the seed of Nimrod. When we reject the truth because it contradicts our desires or our ego, that is the methodology of Babylon. When we think we can sin in secret and escape the consequences, we are building our own fragile towers. We live in an era of the self. The modern world tells us to worship ourselves, to follow our own truth, to be the kings and queens of our own reality. This subtle autocracy of the ego is the modern Babylon. And just like Nimrod, when we rely entirely on ourselves, we are defeated by the smallest trials. A microscopic virus, a sudden loss of wealth, a moment of anxiety, these are the modern gnats that bring us to our knees, showing us how weak we truly are without Allah. However, Divine Sagas is not just about warning, it is about hope. The story of Nimrod and Ibrahim teaches us that the laws of this world are subject to the will of the Creator. When you feel like you are surrounded by fire, the fire of debt, the fire of sickness, the fire of depression, or the fire of oppression, remember Ibrahim in the pyre. He did not panic. He did not compromise his values to escape the heat. He turned to Allah and said, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil, and the nature of the fire changed. You might be facing a situation right now where the logic of the world says you are finished. The doctors might have given up. The lawyers might have said there is no case. The bank might be foreclosing. You are standing in front of your own catapult, about to be thrown into the flames. But if your heart is connected to the Lord of Ibrahim, the fire can become a garden. Allah can suspend the laws of cause and effect for you. He can turn your greatest calamity into your greatest blessing. He can send an army of unseen forces to fight battles you didn't even know you were fighting. The lesson is clear. Do not fear the Nimrods of this world, whether they are people, systems, or your own fears. They are powerless. A single cell in their body can turn against them at Allah's command. Fear only the one who holds the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and love him, because he is the one who saves his friends from the fire. As we conclude this journey through history, look at your own life. Are you building a tower of arrogance, or are you building a home of submission? Are you chasing the validation of fading stars, or are you seeking the pleasure of the eternal sun? The choice is yours. The fire is hot, but the mercy of Allah is cool. The tyrant seems strong, but the gnat is ready. Let this story be a wake-up call for your soul. Do not wait for a calamity to humble you. Humble yourself before the calamity comes. Return to Allah while the gate of repentance is open. Turn your eye into you, O Lord, for in the end, the kings of this earth will perish, their palaces will turn to sand, and their names will be forgotten. But the face of your Lord, full of majesty and honor, will remain forever, and those who trusted in him will walk out of the fires of this life, untouched, into the gardens of eternity. Thank you for watching this episode of Divine Sagas. If this story shook your heart, if it made you reflect on the power of Allah and the fragility of man, share it with someone who needs this reminder. We are all travelers in this world, and sometimes we just need a story to light the way home. Until next time, remember, when the world builds a fire to burn you, Allah can build a garden to protect you. Peace be upon you.